I actually want to see Trent McDuffie on Jamar Chase as much as possible, right? Even if it has to sort of break your principles in terms of what you do in the secondary, I just want to see the matchup.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank. If you're thinking about starting a business or know someone who is, check out Emprise Bank's SBA loans. It's always good to know your options, and they can be your partner in possible.
5 things to watch here on KC Sports Network, getting you ready for Chiefs Bengals on Sunday afternoon. Kent Swanson here with Maddie Lane, and obviously this is a big game for the Chiefs going up against rival Joe Burrow and the Bengals. And stopping Joe Burrow is always going to be one of the keys to the games, and I think the pass rush is going to have some say in that, right, Maddie?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, last week we saw against the Ravens, Chris Jones kind of took over the game to start. He was absolutely unblockable going up against the Baltimore Ravens offensive line. He's moving around. He's calling the shots on the guys he wants to go up against. And as the game wore on, the Ravens said, hey, we can't really block that guy, so let's just have Lamar Jackson run away from him every time. And the Chiefs tried to corral him with the rest of the defensive front. Not a lot of other guys were getting a ton of pressure. Actually, the defensive ends almost played purely contained last week, but I think that's going to change this week against the Bengals. You are going to see a lot more just true pass rush snaps. You're going to have a chance for a Mike Dana. You have a chance for George Karlaftis to really get back on the hunt and get some pressure, get after a quarterback rather than just having to worry about keeping them in the pocket. So I'm excited to see this Chiefs defensive front really get to pin their ears back a little bit and get after the quarterback.
Hey, I'm fascinated to see, how impactful Chris Jones is in this game too, because the last time that Jones went up against Joe Burrow, he was a very disruptive factor in that game, and the Bengals really didn't have a great answer for him. But you're right, it should free up some opportunities for some other players to be able to get some one-on-one situations to try to rush the passer a little bit. But I still think Chris, it still does have to start with Chris, and even if he's getting extra attention, he's got to find a way, to continue to create impact in the middle of that pocket, because I don't think Joe Burrow looked all that comfortable in the pocket in this last game. He looked like he was getting the ball out a lot quicker. He didn't look as apt to hold on to the football a little bit more. So if you can collapse the pocket a little bit more, if you can walk, the offensive line back into the quarterback a little bit, I think it's going to create some opportunities for some other players to clean some things up for some of the murkiness of the interior. And so, I look at these tackles, right? And we look at Orlando Brown Jr. and as of right now, Trent Brown playing at right tackle for the Bengals. And these are two very big but slow-footed tackles that can be beat with speed rush. I'm curious to see if the Chiefs are able to get up the field, try to beat the corner on these two tackles, Matthew.
Absolutely. And I like that you started with Chris Jones there, and I'm even going to throw Tershawn Wharton in there, who I thought had a good game against the Ravens too. Joe Burrow is very comfortable staying tight in the pocket. He's very comfortable not getting super deep and just kind of hanging out in a shallow pocket. And so you do need to get that pocket push. You need to get penetration in the middle of the pocket from a Jones, from a Wharton, to push him back to the point to where you have these edge rushers who can take advantage of these big offensive tackles who don't necessarily have the fleetest of feet to get deep up the arc and to show off a ton of range, but what they do have is mass. They have size, they have length, they have girth. They can push rushers around the arc up the edge, and if you don't have somebody forcing Joe Burrow to step back, then it's easy to keep them out of the play. So it starts up with Chris Jones, Tershawn Wharton, making him step back, making him feel uncomfortable, and then it comes time for these guys on the outside to really make things happen. And then Trent Brown specifically playing right tackle for the Bengals last week against the New England Patriots. He had a rough game. He gave up a ton of pressures. He really could not handle the pass rush coming across from him. And I think if you look at what he struggled with, it was not only just speed, but it was also turning that speed to power. This is stuff that George Karlaftis does really well. So I wouldn't be surprised to see a lot of Karlaftis coming there off the offense's right side, letting him get in there, show off, some of his hand technique, but really just trying to beat up on Trent Brown, who did not look ready to play a football game. If they get a repeat performance from Trent Brown versus the Kansas City Chiefs, Karlaftis is going to have a ton of pressures. He's going to make plays, and you pair that with a Chris Jones and a Tershawn Wharton who looked unblockable at times in week one, that's going to be very difficult for the Bengals to overcome. And then on the flip side, we talked about it. These are big tackles. But do you think that we might see some speed coming off from the bench from the Chiefs with the Felix Anudike-Uzomah?
Yeah, I think there's a chance that you could see Felix Anudike-Uzomah making an impact in this game, because the Chiefs really don't have a ton of guys that are great up the arc. They don't have a ton of, speed off the arc. That's not the kind of defensive ends that they typically employ on their 53-man roster. They like guys with a little bit more density, like you talked about with the George Karlaftis. And, that's worked well for them because, they have a big, bulky front that, is tough to run against, and they can move them around. They can move them inside out. But when you look at Felix Anudike-Uzomah, he kind of doesn't fit the same mold that you see of the rest of the edge rushers. He's a guy that has some athletic ability that exceeds what they have on the rest of their front. And it's a guy that has the kind of burst. I thought he had, he had two things going for him. I think he had, he showed his athleticism, his speed, watch him run out there and chasing down a screen out on the edge. But he has an outstanding motor too. Like, those are two things that I think really work well for him. So I think the hope is he's able to get off the football quickly, which is something that was been very up and down for him. It looked a little bit better than it had in weeks prior, getting off the football and trying to rush up the arc. He might be able to beat one of those tackles off the edge. He might be able to get a clean win on those heavier footed tackles for the Cincinnati Bengals. So I think that's a way that he can make an impact, but also he can be there to clean some stuff up too. He can put himself in a position to potentially clean some stuff up if the Chiefs are able to push that pocket a little bit more in the middle and Joe Burrow's looking for something to escape. I think Felix Anudike-Uzomah could be a solution to somebody that can close that play out and chase Joe Burrow down, because he has shown that kind of motor in the early on, just kind of the early, parts of this season. Anything else on the pass rush you want to say before we get out of here, Matthew?
I think we've touched on it most. I was calling a shot here. I think George Karlaftis is going to have multiple sacks, and I think we're going to get one pass batted down by Karlaftis, and then we are going to be quickly reminded about his water polo playing background very quickly after he bats the pass down to the line of scrimmage. But I think across the board, I think Karlaftis has a great game, but we know the Chiefs' defensive front is very good at knocking passes down. Chris Jones has always been great. Karlaftis has been good. Dane has even been getting his hands up. That's another aspect. You can't get to the quarterback. You start working against a quarterback that gets the ball out quickly like Joe Burrow. I think the Chiefs' defensive front can definitely get their hands up in the passing lanes when the pass rush doesn't get home, especially because, the Bengals' offensive line hasn't been great. They're not always going to have their hands in you to keep you from getting up there. That's an offensive lineman's job, is to stop a defender from getting up to knock passes down. If they're already struggling, if they're worried about the speed because they've already given up a couple plays, it gets a lot easier to pause, jump up in the air, knock some passes down. So I think beyond just the pass rush, just batting passes down at the line of scrimmage is something that they've done very well in the past. We'll be right back with more 5 Things presented by Batchelder's Farms.
Shop Chiefs tickets and more with no fees. Plus, save big with code KCSN at ticketsforless.com, the official ticket provider of KC Sports Network.
I love a great deal just as much as the next guy, but I'm not going to crawl through a bed of hot coals just to save a few bucks. It has to be easy. No hoops, no BS. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with the purchase of a 3-month plan, I called them on it. And you know what? It turns out it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. The longest part of the process was the time I spent on hold waiting to break up with my old provider. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/KCSN5. That's mintmobile.com/KCSN, the number 5. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/KCSN5. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details.
All right, guys, welcome back to 5 Things. My name is Hayley Lewis. I am filling in for Matt Hamilton. This is what I'm looking out for on Sunday's game. So whenever the Bengals come to town, it is obviously a great game. Whenever Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow step on the same field. It doesn't have that same feel, though, this year. Now, I know it's early, and usually we see the Bengals and the Chiefs going on later in the season. This year, though, I'm looking to see if the Bengals are bungled. Are the Bengals busted? Are they who they say they are? Are they still an AFC contender? Now, we've heard Jamar Chase, wide receiver for the Bengals, popping off per usual. He likes to be a little bit chirpy. He was sharing in the locker room this week that he believes that the Bengals are still great, that the Bengals are great, that they're an AFC contender, that they're going to hang right up there with, Patrick Mahomes and company. Now, do I agree? I don't know. I think there's a lot to be seen. Yes, they play terrible week 1 under Zach Taylor. We've heard that stat probably all throughout week 1. We know that they struggle. But do they struggle as bad as they did against the Patriots, getting upset in the way that they did? Is Joe Burrow's wrist actually still hurting him. We all saw everyone, zooming in on how he picks up a Gatorade bottle. And my guy picking it up quite like this, dainty, a little dainty. Not sure if he noticed that it was hurting him, but he told reporters, the next day, nothing was wrong. I'm totally fine. Why are you watching the way I pick up a Gatorade bottle? But he also did play around with his wrist on the field. We also saw it on the sideline as well. So is it actually hindering him more than he's letting on? Now, I know that the game against the Patriots was the first regular season game play that he saw ever since undergoing wrist surgery this past season. But, it's left for speculation. Also, the Jamar Chase hold-in. That's got to be a problem. They allude that it is not. They say that it has nothing to do with the struggles they've seen on the field, that they're perfectly fine. Everyone's still in sync. But you got to imagine a guy going in and out of practice, in and out of training camp, and not always being there and present has to have an effect on the locker room. They say it doesn't, but I say it does. Also, I'm going to be watching to see, T. Higgins. It looks like he's not going to be playing again. So it would be 2 straight weeks without T. Higgins, a wide receiver target, a very trusted target of Joe Burrow as well. So are they going to not be able to open up the field like they normally do? Is Joe Burrow the caliber of quarterback that we always say that he is without his receiving core? The same was argued for Patrick Mahomes last season, right? We all got to see, was Patrick Mahomes the actual QB he claims to be, the greatest of the great, if he doesn't have the receiving core like he normally does? Well, Mahomes proved last season he was able to get it done without having all the, he got it done without Tyreek Hill, he gets it done without Juju Smith-Schuster, and then he got it done with a culmination of different wide receivers who could not catch the ball. Can Joe Burrow do the same if Jamar Chase is still in contract drama and T. Higgins is still sidelined? So there's a lot to be said about what's going on with the Bengals. Are they busted? I think it's way too premature to say that. I think it's a great storyline. I like talking about it, but definitely I'm expecting a good showdown between Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes. Now, we did get to hear from Chris Jones earlier this week, and Chris Jones kind of talked about the rivalry that it is between Cincinnati and Kansas City. And he said, point blank, it wasn't a rivalry. It wasn't a rivalry until we started winning a few more games. Because remind you, Cincinnati came into Kansas City and then they whooped up on the Chiefs and they beat them 3 consecutive times within the same calendar year. Yes, split up into 2 different seasons, but it didn't look good for KC. However, Kansas City had the last laugh. Now, they faced the Bengals late in the season. Last year, it was against Jake Browning, so not the same when you don't have Joe Burrow on the field. But then, of course, Patrick Mahomes got the better of Burrow in the AFC Championship when ultimately Kansas City went on to win the Super Bowl. That was Super Bowl 57 when they beat the Philadelphia Eagles. So not the most previous one, but the one before that. So I can't imagine the Bengals being so far removed from the team that they were in the AFC Championship game that we're not going to at least see some kind of good matchup on Sunday. Is it going to be the postseason form that we're used to seeing in the Bengals? Maybe not necessarily, because again, they still have some stuff going on with their wide receivers. They still have some issues potentially with their quarterback and his injury. And then they also have some issues going on right now in the defense that I know other people have locked in on. So all eyes are really just going to be on the fact that are the Bengals the AFC contender that they claim to be when they go up against the Chiefs? That's what my eyes are going to be on this entire time. Definitely have a lot more things probably to pick apart after this one, but that would be my 5th thing to keep my eyes on. As always, we want to remind you guys, make sure that you like and subscribe right here on the KCSN YouTube channel. And Maddie, I'll throw it back to you.
And now I think it's time that we continue this 5 things presented by Batchelder's Farms, and we go over to the guys from That Football Show talking about the beef along the Cincinnati Bengals defense and about the Chiefs' offensive efficiency.
Appreciate you, Maddie. We are here kicking off 5 things. Matt Verderam, Tucker Franklin. We're talking about Chiefs' offensive efficiency. And look, Matt, we're always talking about beefs of the week here at Batchelder Family Farms and here at That Football Show. We're talking about beef all the time. Look, I really think the whole beef of the week is just the Bengals versus the Chiefs.
Yeah.
The biggest beef in the NFL right now. And I think some of the biggest beef has came from the Bengals defense going up against the Chiefs offense. Matt, you had some pretty interesting numbers kind of diving into the efficiency of how the Chiefs have gone so far this year.
Yeah, so the Chiefs, it's interesting. They played last year's number 1 scoring defense in Baltimore.
Yeah.
And they didn't have Hollywood Brown, and it was Xavier Worthy's first game, and the Chiefs led the league in yards per play in week 1. 7.1. Packers matched them at 7.1. But Kansas City was excellent offensively, really economical at the way they moved the football. By the way, like just to put in perspective how crazy that number is. So 7.1, if you look at the rest of the teams in week one, the Packers at 7.1, the Colts were at even 7. Tampa Bay was 4th at 6.4. So like it drops off pretty substantially.
Yeah.
So they were 11th in yardage offensively all told, 353 yards. But the reason they were at 7.1 yards per play, they only had 50 offensive plays in the game. So normally most teams are going to get 65 to 70 somewhere in there every week. Chiefs, super efficient when they had the ball. Now on the flip side of that, the Bengals only gave up 16 points, but they played New England. New England obviously not exactly a powerhouse.
Right.
The Bengals finished week one 14th best, basically middle of the road in yards against, 290. That's going to be interesting. Like if they were only an average defense against New England, and a lot of that was that they missed 1 million tackles in the game and so on and so forth. What does that look like against Kansas City? Because the Chiefs obviously present a hell of a lot more of a stringent challenge than what New England did, and it's at Arrowhead. I'd be curious to see if the Chiefs can build on that momentum they had week one with that offense against a very good defense, and now playing, I would say, an average defense.
But I will say, as we kind of ratchet the microscope up a little bit, right, when we look at the Chiefs' offensive efficiency combined with the Bengals' numbers on defense, looking at one of those matchups that could be a real beef is Rashee Rice. I mean, I think Rashee Rice had a really good game week one. How does he continue that into week two?
Right.
It's like he really could have a mismatch disadvantage. When we were kind of breaking it down on that football show, he could have a big mismatch this week going up against this Bengals defense.
He could. So look, Mike Hilton's a really good slot corner. He's been a slot, a really quality player for a long time. He's 30 years old. He's 4 inches shorter than Rashee Rice. He's 20 pounds lighter.
Yeah.
Like if you're the Chiefs, you're probably pretty willing to take that matchup. Younger legs, bigger body, both in height and just in mass. I mean, if you're Rashee Rice, you're sitting there going like, I can basically box this guy out and catch some balls, right? Like if you're the Chiefs, if you're going to look where you feel like it's one-on-one down the seam for 20, 25 yards, throw it up to him.
Yeah.
He's bigger. He's younger. He probably jump a little high. He's going to make the play on the ball. So I wonder if this is one of these games where if Rashee Rice isn't completely open, he's still open. Because they're just going to say, look, you're physically superior here. Like, we're just going to get you an opportunity to make a play. It could be a game where, if it's one-on-one with Rice and Hilton inside, not a lot of help, wouldn't be shocked if the Chiefs try to go that route.
Loved how they used Rashee Rice in week one. A lot of those on those RPOs, those middle of the field advantage there. Looks like he's really growing into his own. Patrick Mahomes really trusting him on the high leverage downs, high leverage situations as well. He did have a little bit of the drops. Remember early on in his career, he seemed to fix those. And crazy what a jugs machine will do. He did seem to fix those, and the Chiefs are rolling into this one as they host the Cincinnati Bengals. I think right now, for my money, maybe have the most beef of any two teams in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, look, I was saying this on a radio spot, actually. A lot of fans, I feel like there's rivalries that fans cling to, and like rightfully so, because they're historical, like the Chiefs and the Raiders, right? When is the last time the Chiefs and the Raiders have been good at the same time?
Not in my lifetime.
It's been a while. Chiefs and Denver, certainly the rivalry I kind of grew up with. Like, those were the games that you really got up for. But really, when you look at it, like the Chiefs and Bills are a rivalry, but it's almost like a respectful rivalry. Like the players don't really talk crap about each other.
Right.
You don't get a lot of that. Like, to be fair to the Bills, you don't get a whole lot of like chirping from the Bills. You get a lot of chirping from Cincinnati. You get all Burrowhead and the mayor and like all this other crap. And the Chiefs give it back to them. Like, so that is a genuine, like, we can't stand them rivalry on both sides. And it's fun, man. It's a hell of a lot of fun. I think this will be a game where, if the Chiefs do have a nice lead, I don't anticipate them being gentlemen about it. I anticipate them being like, hey, look at that, play action bomb. Like, I think that's the kind of game this may be.
Looking forward to it. Let's go ahead and send it back to Maddie Lane for more 5 things.
Can't wait to get my eyes on some of that beef going on there. All right. Next up for 5 things, we got Benny coming in with Benny's Chiefs picks presented by Underdog Fantasy.
All right, Maddie, good to be here again and good to be talking a few higher, lower plays to round things out here over on Underdog. Solid week last week for the season opener between the Chiefs and the Ravens. As I think we can probably best describe it, we came up just a toe short by going 3 for 3. Just that Patrick Mahomes, lower on the rushing side, decided that he didn't want to go out and scramble, which, Pat, I totally get it. But we hit on the Derrick Henry touchdown. We hit on Lamar Jackson staying lower than 1.5 passing touchdowns. And we are back again for Chiefs and Bengals from Arrowhead for week number 2 with 3 of our favorite picks over on Underdog. And if you guys haven't had a chance to check out Underdog yet, it has been such a fun start to the season. It is the best and easiest place to play fantasy sports. There is also a great way to, whether if you want to go ahead and just draft a team for the week, you can do that, or you can also participate in these higher, lower opportunities as well. And fun fact, if you sign up with promo code KCSN, not only do you get to claim a free pick, and there's 2 of them this week, you can either go with Caleb Williams of the Chicago Bears. He has to go higher than 0.5 passing yards, which I know he struggled in week 1. That's my quarterback. But I do expect him to go over that number this week on Sunday Night Football against the Houston Texans. I believe he will go higher than 0.5 passing yards. And if you played last week and you entered code KCSN, which also gives you a first-time deposit offer up to $1,000 in bonus cash, for all players, you also have an opportunity to go higher for CeeDee Lamb, higher than 0.5 receiving yards. The Cowboys at home against the New Orleans Saints. So make sure you use that promo code KCSN. But let's dive in to these picks, along with, of course, the free picks that are available as well. Let's start with the Kansas City Chiefs and Travis Kelce. I like him to go higher than 5 receptions this week. For Kelce, if there's anything that we've learned, I think collectively in the NFL, it's that it's to fade the noise after the week 1 overreaction. Kelce, not great last week. 3 receptions, 34 yards, had a key drop. But these are matchups that he tends to show up and really play well for. It's a chance to take on his home state Bengals. Cincinnati a year ago ranked dead last in the NFL in allowing receptions to tight ends. I expect Mahomes to target him often, get him back in the flow of the game on Sunday afternoon. So give me higher on Travis Kelce receptions at 5. I got another higher on the Bengals side. And that is for Joe Burrow, higher than 0.5 interceptions. There's a couple reasons for this play. The first is that I know the numbers for Lamar Jackson last week looked pretty damning in the Chiefs' inability to stop him. 122 yards on the ground, scrambled 16 times. Baltimore did a really good job at avoiding some of Kansas City's pressure. But that's not to say that the Chiefs didn't get pressure into the backfield with Lamar. With Burrow, he's not going to run for 122 yards, just simply not what he does. The Chiefs last week finished with a top 5 pressure rate. The Bengals also struggled to contain New England a week ago. So Burrow could be playing and trying to make some plays happen, be a little bit of attempting hero ball. So I have some concerns there. And we might be dealing on Burrow's side with a lingering wrist injury. T. Higgins could be out. Jamar Chase might end up getting multiple double coverage from Kansas City. I just envision a scenario where he's going to have to throw the ball up a couple times, and Kansas City has shown with the pressure that they can bring and also with their strength in the secondary that they might be able to take the ball away from Burrow. So give me a higher on 0.5 interceptions for Joe Burrow. And finally, this one may not be so popular, but hear me out. Patrick Mahomes, it's a lower play. I like him to go lower than 272.5 passing yards. You think about it from a historical context. Mahomes versus this Bengals defense hasn't been great as far as passing the ball through the air at volume. He's averaged just over 242 yards per game during the regular season. The Chiefs, if you're looking at the projections, are projected to win by a little less than a touchdown. And also, the Bengals defense gave up a bunch of yards on the ground to Ramondre Stevenson and the Patriots last week. So if you buy into game script that Kansas City will be up, that they're going to have some success on the ground, that Travis Kelce in that short into intermediate passing game is going to be all right, there's no reason for Mahomes to have to chuck it a ton in this game and exceed that number of 272.5. Obviously, still the best in the league and a guy that you trust and start in your fantasy leagues each and every week. But when it comes to this particular number, remember, we're playing the numbers. I'm going lower for Mahomes at 272.5. So those are our three underdog picks for this week for Chiefs and Bengals. Travis Kelce, higher than 5 receptions. Joe Burrow, higher than 0.5 interceptions. And Patrick Mahomes, lower than 272.5 passing yards. And get all of those over on Underdog. Get in on the action. Don't forget that promo code KCSM and claim your free pick, which can either be Caleb Williams, higher than 0.5 passing yards, and then for all players, CeeDee Lamb, higher than 0.5 receiving yards. Maddie, it is all yours, my friend.
All right, and those were Benny's picks. Make sure you keep those in the back of your mind heading into Sunday. And then finally, for our last thing here for 5 things, let's head over to the Only Weird Games and talk about kind of the first real look for the Chiefs secondary as they go up against a more traditional offense this week.
Thank you, Matthew. It's Only Weird Games here. Joshua Briscoe, Nate Taylor, and Seth Kaiser as we look ahead to Week 2, Chiefs, Bengals. Seth, I'll start with you here. The Chiefs had a real test, a series of tests against the Baltimore Ravens, but there are a lot of very different things coming from their divisional rival as Cincinnati arrives at Arrowhead, just to be clear. What interests you about this matchup? Why does this set the Chiefs defense up very differently than the Ravens matchup did?
It's interesting to me because the Bengals are a really different team schematically with what they do on offense than the Bengals. The Bengals are real different than the Bengals, Josh. They're very different than the Ravens. The Ravens are, you saw it throughout the game. The way you've got a game plan for them, it changes your pass rush because you got to play a ton of contain with Lamar Jackson. You got to do a ton of spying. They're going to run the ball more. They're going to have a ton of 21 and 12 personnel. So it affects who you have on the field in terms of linebackers and defensive linemen. The Bengals are a lot more, I'd say traditional, but like when I say traditional, I mean like the last 10 years of the NFL traditional. Plenty of shotgun stuff, plenty of 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers on the field, spreading it out a little bit more, a little more standard drop back type stuff to where you can actually get, in my opinion, the first real look at the Chiefs secondary and pass rush against a more traditional passing team and passing attack. I'm really curious to see how they handle Jamar Chase without L'Jarius Sneed, whether they decide to have Trent McDuffie shadow him. Given skill sets there, that's an interesting matchup. I think the ball skill aspect of things could be tough for Trent McDuffie, that was tough on L'Jarius Sneed too with Jamar Chase because he's a different kind of animal. But it's going to be a good opportunity to see, Jalen Watson, who's battled the Bengals plenty of times, Joshua Williams, who has as well, to see how they deal with it, an offense that's a little more traditional, and then the pass rush, seeing if they can do more than what we saw against the Ravens. Against the Ravens, it wasn't super impressive outside of Chris Jones. It'll be nice to see now, okay, what does it look like when you're not just playing contain the whole time? So those are a couple things I'm going to be keeping an eye on.
The receivers are interesting now, Nate, because Tyler Boyd won't be out there on account of being a Tennessee Titan, and then T. Higgins with the hamstring. Jamar Chase had a very tumultuous offseason, and I'll go ahead and say into Week 1 at least. Where do you see those matchups going? To Seth's point, Trent McDuffie versus Jamar Chase, I have to remind myself, and therefore everyone around me, of this fact every few weeks. Jamar Chase plays like he's 6'8". He is a 6-foot-tall wide receiver. Trent McDuffie, quote, little guy at 5'10", giving up 2 inches of height, but it feels like, again, it's the ball skills, as yes. Seth mentions there. What do you think the plan's going to be for handling a very different version of the Bengals passing attack, even aside from the fact that Joe Burrow couldn't seem to push the ball downfield in Week 1?
Yeah, and because there's the potential to not have T. Higgins, I actually want to see Trent McDuffie on Jamar Chase as much as possible, right? Even if it has to sort of break your principles in terms of what you do in the secondary, I just want to see the matchup because it would, you would think, in, thought process, force Joe Burrow to at least go to his second and third reads, and then you hope, Jalen Watson and Joshua Williams can hold up in coverage. Now, I do think because this is a more traditional offense with, the 11 personnel on the field and a quarterback that didn't particularly play well in the first week, now you involve Justin Reed in a lot more blitzes. Now you can bring Jalen Watson off the edge. You can do a little bit more coverage disguises than maybe you were sort of not allowed to do against Lamar Jackson, just because you had to figure out if he was going to scramble or if he was going to try to extend the play, or even if it was a design run, right? The Bengals will likely not have any design runs for Joe Burrow at this point in the season. So once you eliminate some of those factors, I do want to see, hey, if Chuck McDuffie's your best cornerback, then you should try to treat him as such against their best wide receiver, especially, again, if no T. Higgins is available as a viable, legitimate second option. And now it creates chances for Chamari Connor, I think Justin Reed, and even Jalen Watson to some degree to blitz so that it can actually help the pass rush when it's third and long and Joe Burrow's got to find a target, dropping back to pass without as much elusiveness and athleticism as Lamar Jackson.
We'll go ahead and give it right back to our most elusive member, certainly the most athletic. Matt, you can take it from here.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. So that's been it. That's 5 things here presented by KCSN, where we all talk about 5 things in this game that we are looking forward to watching as it comes along. We appreciate you guys spending that time with us. Thank you. We would love for you guys to spend some more time with us for the KCSN postgame show. It starts up as soon as the game is over on the KCSN YouTube page. We'd love to see you guys there. And hey, go Chiefs, guys. Froggles, done.